Good day to you as we begin our final week of Intro to Mass Media. And I'd like to ask you, speaking of week, is there anything that you can think of that you do 10,000 times a week? 10,000 times a week. Blinking? That may be something. Your heart beating? Maybe. Can you come up with anything else? How about being exposed to 10,000 advertisements every single week? Because that's what's happening if you're living in America. So we're here today to talk about advertising and how embedded it truly is in our culture. And we have nowhere to look other than the online world. It's amazing how much advertising follows you around today because of all the content that you're choosing to put on the internet. I went down to the Bethlehem casino to buy some concert tickets. I didn't give my email out. I didn't give my phone out. I bought my tickets, and by the time I got home, I had an email from the Sands Casino giving me a list of dates of upcoming shows at that venue. It was amazing to me. It must have been Facebook. I must have had the app open, or my data was sent to Facebook down when I was down in Bethlehem, and then Facebook sells it to the Sands. That's what's going on in this world. We have an incredible advertising culture today, and we can say that our culture is a consumer culture because of it, and we're going to get to that later on in the class. Now, some people say ads are not all that bad because they do tell people about new products and new services. They do get people to feel better about things. They do get people to change their minds and take on things. And not all advertising is commercial advertising either. The government advertises. I walked past a church on my way to class this morning. There was a big sign up that said, God does not judge us by our sins. It's advertising, and then it's saying, come to Mass. And then it had the time and date. So advertising is all over the place. And my Swedish friend has a very strong saying when he talks about advertising. He says, successful advertising owns a piece of your mind. It owns a piece of your mind. It's like when you walk into a store and you're going to buy a product, and it's going to be a soda and it's going to be a cola, but it's not going to be RC, it's not going to be Pepsi, it's not going to be whatever generic brand is in there. It's going to be Coke, because Coke owns a piece of your mind and you're unwilling to try anything else. So advertising, a lot of components to it. Now let's talk about the history of advertising in the US and really the birth of consumer culture. We know that advertising in the very beginning of this country in the 1700s was targeted at narrow elite audiences because, first of all, they were the only ones who could read advertising. But secondly, they were the ones who had money. Not everybody had money to spend on products that were advertised in the 1700s. One of the first publications was the Boston Newsletter, and it ran ads in 1704. 1704 ran ads for goods that were sold in merchant shops. There were no brands. It was like oats, honey, raisins, coffee, and customers would judge goods by the quality, not by the brand names. That all changes with industrialization, returning to that absolutely sweeping period of our history. Industrialization in the 1800s, it brought mass production of goods and products, and it brought the price down. So then more money could be made, and then that money could be spent on advertising, which in turn fueled more consumption. Remember, in industrialization, people are living in the cities, and people are no longer born in life with an identity that they're going to have for the rest of their. You're always going to be a barrel maker. You're always going to be a blacksmith. You're always going to be a farmer. No, it's not like that in industrialization. People can choose their livelihoods, and they can therefore choose in a way their identity, and part of that is associated with advertising, the kinds of lifestyle that people want to have and the kind of lifestyle that people want to project to others when they go out by wearing advertised goods. So in the 1800s, by the 1800s now, we start to have the rise of department stores. These are not places where things are made. Department stores are basically houses where stuff is sold, but it's made somewhere else. Big ones or recent ones have gone out of business, like Sears. J.C. Penney is still around. But in Philadelphia, we have the Wanamaker department store. It was one of the very first department stores. Now, along with the birth of consumer culture, we also start to have standardized goods being advertised for because the goods are standardized. This stapler right here is not unique. This same stapler is owned by thousands of people all across the United States because it's mass produced. And the ad that goes into a staple circular that comes out to people is going to be able to represent that accurately because all the staplers are the same. So advertising is growing up. And because of that, we also have the growth of brand names. Brand names. It's the idea that more and more packaged goods are coming to the market. And the development of a brand name was a way of driving the forces behind that advertising by associating imagery and feelings with the product. That's what a brand name is. It's a word or a phrase. It's attached to a consumer good so that it can be better promoted. A brand name reduces uncertainty. That's the whole plan of McDonald's when it was born, is that a hamburger should taste the exact same in New York as it does in Florida. It's a kind of quality control, and brand names help to do that. It helps to keep that brand care. When you're driving on the highway and you see the golden arches of McDonald's or the Chick-fil-A sign, that brand is in a way controlling for the standardization of the product. One of the very first people to make use of this in the mass media world was Thomas Barat. Thomas Barat developed the very first branded soap. He called it pear, like the fruit, soap, that you wash yourself with. And he came up with a slogan, an advertising slogan, and it was, "Have you had your pears today?" And it's like, wow, I have to have it today. And that's driving consumption of that. Now let's move more directly to media, talk about how our media in this country are advertising supported. In the 1830s, the penny press, remember the penny press newspaper cost only a penny? The price came down because it was so inexpensive to produce that paper, and also because advertising started being infused in the paper, and the paper didn't need to rely on people purchasing it. Could look for advertising. So very early on, newspapers adopted advertising as a major source of revenue. That's one of the reasons that they're having such a hard time today, because a big chunk of their advertising was classified ads, like buying furniture or seeing a place for rent. All of that has been moved over to Craigslist and other venues. So the newspaper lost that source of revenue, and now it's just left with other ads, and that's competing with the web, where ads are popping up all over the place. Magazines started a little bit more slowly with advertising than newspapers. They started more slowly. Originally, ads were just kind of put in there for local products, but once magazines had a national appeal because of the photographs and because of the stories having appeal to people no matter where you live, then advertisers started to get into the picture. So advertisers, a little bit slow compared to newspapers. Radio first tried taxes for a very brief period to raise money, but that didn't work. So it very quickly went over to that toll that was sold to AT&T, and then that was just a way of ushering in advertising. A toll was advertising. So radio very quickly went over to advertising. Let's not forget that William Paley actually founded the CBS radio network just to advertise his cigars. Television had ads from the very beginning. As soon as the content was on television, there were ads in it. And of course, the online world, the same as well. Now let's talk about different types of consumer advertising. There are two different types of consumer advertising. One is local advertising, and that's where a direct action message is the strategy that's normally used. Direct action message, that's to get consumers to engage in a behavior. Hurry down, these prices won't last. While supplies last. That's a tagline that you hear very often in radio ads and TV ads. It's designed to get you to have a kind of anxiety that if you don't get a move on it, you may not have the chance at that product because it may not be there anymore. That's local advertising. National advertising builds demand for a nationally available product, but it does not send the consumer to a specific store, lets the consumer decide. So, the new breakfast meal at McDonald's, for example. That's consumer advertising. Now let's talk about advocacy advertising. Advocacy advertising is promoting a point of view as opposed to a product. We see this in the arena of politics all the time when we have Supreme Court candidates going before the Senate to be confirmed. We have advocacy ads saying that this person should be voted for or this person should not be supported. We also have advocacy ads for campaigns of health, milk, for example, or vitamins, or reducing smoking. Advocacy ads are generally speaking in the area of the public good, trying to improve society. Similarly, we have public service advertising. This is to promote behaviors and habits, public service advertising, that is not associated with profit. So it is things like don't light forest fires, be careful in the fire with Smokey the Bear. Or there's a whole bunch of radio ads that are put out with McGruff, the crime dog. about traveling in pairs at night as opposed to by yourself. So there's a lot of public service ads that are sort of extensions of advocacy advertising, but there's no profit involved. There's also trade advertising. Trade advertising is business to business. So if you're a hair salon, you're probably going to get a magazine or an online newsletter, or you're going to receive a link to join an organization that's going to be selling products to the hair salon. Like trimmers, clippers, makeup products, and hairstyling products. All of that's going to be in those trade magazines. And almost all industries have their own point-to-point or peer-to-peer, not just magazines, but advertising promotions. Now let's talk about the advertising business. It has grown up as a giant industry. If you go to New York City in Times Square, the biggest ad agencies in the world are there. There's a Netflix show called Mad Men, a Netflix series, I should say, which depicts advertising in the early part of this country as it grew up into a really big business. So let's talk about the four major groups that make up this industry. And the first one is the client. The client is the company with something to sell. The something to sell may be a new product, or it may be increasing awareness about an existing product. Something like Tide detergent has been around for years. And a lot of times the advertisement for Tide is just to remind people that this is a detergent that has a long-standing reputation in American culture. Sometimes you're trying to convince people to switch brands. Every time I log on to Verizon, I see a promotion trying to get people to switch from AT&T and T-Mobile by getting a buy one phone, get one free. The biggest advertisers in recent years in U.S. media are AT&T, Verizon, Chevy, Ford, Toyota, McDonald's, Walmart, all big names that you know about. That's one group in the advertising industry. A second group is the agency. There is an ad agency that's usually involved in the creation of ad content. That's what the agency specializes in. It will develop a campaign. We'll develop it like Nike, the Just Do It campaign, which still lingers on in our culture. That's a campaign that's developed by an ad agency. So an ad agency works separately to sell airtime or space. If it's broadcaster, they're selling seconds, like 60 seconds, 30 seconds. If it's a newspaper, they're selling space. If it's a web, they're selling space in the form of a banner, etc. So they sell space and airtime to media. Yeah, so they're the ones who are selling that space to media, and the media are opening it up. And so the ad agency is involved in a lot of facets of that component of the business. They're involved in research and planning. If a car manufacturer wants to hire an ad agency to advertise an electric car, let's say it's the Prius, the Toyota Prius, that ad agency has got to know the audience for that vehicle. It's going to be a very, very specialized audience. So the ad agency is involved in research and planning. And secondly, creative activity. You're always trying to invent new ways of getting people to remember products. Geico is famous for having supposedly funny television ads with the gecko lizard and just off the wall skits. That's all in the name of getting that company recognized, just remembering the name Geico. A third group is the media. The media are the radio stations, the TV stations, the web pages, the billboards. Let's not forget about billboards. They're all over our country. The internet, any form of the internet, magazines, bus benches. There's a lot of different places that you can see advertising in the United States. And newspapers, the ad revenue is declining, but still, the newspaper is the third largest ad revenue source. So it's still being spent on quite a bit. And that's the big city newspapers, and the New York Timeses, and those are the newspapers that fetch most of the ad chunk of ad dollars. Newspapers do have the advantage that they can have very detailed ads that you can clip out, but you can have addresses, phone numbers, you can have dates, you can have prices, you can have all kinds of stuff on there, and you can do very targeted coverage at specific cities, like just Philadelphia, for example. Magazines, they're an excellent medium for reaching a very specific niche audience. I mean, the people who read Outdoor World, all about adventuring, going out kayaking, it's a very narrow slice of the audience, as is the people who read the National Review, which is a very political magazine. So it's an excellent medium if you have very, very targeted, if you have products that are targeted to narrow ranges of people, men 18 to 34 or females 25 to 54, they're divided into demographics that are very, very narrow for magazines. Great print quality, great photos. That's, you still can't beat the magazine. Even the electronic web page can't beat the vividness of a glossy magazine. Outdoor advertising, or billboards, if you prefer, it's an excellent medium for reaching people who are in a captive environment. They're in their car, they're bored to tears, and they're looking for something to visually stimulate them, so you can grab them, but you only have a couple seconds to grab them, and otherwise they're gone. They're passed on by. Radio is really, really good also for people in their cars as well, because 98% or thereabouts of people who are listening to radio are listening in their cars. So radio is another great ad for that. Also, it's a niche audience. That's what radio is, with all those formats out there that we talked about, that once TV stole the audiences for radio has small audiences. So it's a very niche medium as well. Television has prime time to offer national ads, getting to a huge swath of the population. Nowhere near as much as it used to before the internet, before streaming, but still TV between those hours of 8 and 11 o'clock at night. And TV can offer sound, it can do motion, it can do visuals. The only thing we don't have yet is smell, but we might have that. It's coming out of television. And then we have the internet. It's the fastest growing segment of the market for sure. The ads on Facebook are incredible. Facebook just shrugged off that $5 billion fine the other day with record third quarter earnings this year. It's just making so much money. Every time people are typing a keystroke on Facebook, that data is being collected and sold to the Sands Casino. And that's where you're seeing a lot of ads that are popping up wherever you go. And also when you have to join an organization that asks if you want to log on through Facebook, all of that is about collecting your information and selling it. And everybody on the internet is trying to do the same thing. YouTube, Twitter's not a profitable company yet, but still you're exposed to ads. Snapchat, Instagram, all of them, they're all into ads, and ads are growing in that market segment. So that takes us now to the fourth component of the advertising business, which is the audience. The audience is you, me. It's the people consuming media content, having our eyes dragged across those ads. And typically what's being looked at in the audience is, number one, the demographics of the audience, which is going to be the facts about the audience, like their age, sex, gender, income level, education, place of residence, ethnicity, facts, right? And then we also have psychographics. Psychographics are the feelings, beliefs, and attitudes of the audience. Like, you can say that freshmen here, they don't have a really big opinion about parking on campus at ESU, but sophomores do. Sophomores will probably say parking sucks. Why is there such a big difference? Freshmen are technically not permitted to have a vehicle, so they're not going to have that psychographic feeling yet. They're not doing a lot of driving on campus. Sophomores are. So psychographics are the opinions, attitudes, and feelings that come out of a person that are then appealed to, like insecurity. A person's insecurity about going bald, for example, there's an opportunity for an advertisement for a hair product. And there is a company that has performed this in a really unique way. It's called the VALS company, VALS. Values and Attitudes and Lifestyles is what it stands for. And it's divided people up into all kinds of categories. And these categories have a bunch of descriptive behaviors about them, naming things like what they typically own, the media that they watch, listen to, subscribe to, etc. So you have categories like achievers and categories like survivors. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that you have describing people today in terms of psychographic areas. All right, now we want to move to the gay market. The gay market we've highlighted before. This is actually a big economic prospect for a lot of advertisers. The gay market is perceived as upscale and educated. And since they're often, though not always, they're often are not children in the picture, the situation is such that people are gay people are perceived to have more discretionary income at their disposal to spend on things. And so that's why there's a lot of advertisements. Absolute Vodka was one of the first ones to pioneer targeting advertisements specifically at the gay market. Now let's talk about contemporary culture. Contemporary culture is rife with advertising. You notice that when you travel, by the way. You go to another country, you say, there's a quietness, there's a less feeling of an octane society. Not all societies. Japan, for example, is very advertising based, but certainly when you go to Europe, and that's because advertising is prevalent in our country. And I can tell you the Intel jingle. Do you hear the Intel jingle in your head right now? Of course you do. You know how it goes. That's how deep advertising is inside of you. And so there are some criticisms of advertising we want to mention. Number one, that it gets you to buy things you don't need. I mean, how many of you have credit card bills right now and you wonder, why did I do that? I didn't need that. We even have a term for it, right? We call it retail therapy. That's how embedded advertising is in our country. Go shop. Go shop to feel better about something in your life. Also, advertising is criticized for being aesthetically not pleasing. Look at the mountains you drive through here. Sometimes you can't see them. You've got billboards. Some of them are really dilapidated. They're ugly. Also, advertising is criticized for squeezing the legitimate content. That means if you take a half-hour TV show, it's really squeezed down to 22 minutes to make way for the ads. And in the cases of programs that are serious like news, we're losing 8 minutes that we could have to understand the world better. Also, there are problems of clutter with advertising. This is from a practical standpoint. It's not a problem on society, but it's a problem of clutter. It's how do you break through with your message? As I'm traveling all over the place trying to advertise for our master's degree program in CMST, which only takes 15 months, I'm leaving this at bus stops. I'm leaving it at other places, but there's tons of other flyers out there. There's tons of ads every time you log on to the internet. There's tons of ads everywhere you go. There's a lot of clutter out there, and it's hard for advertisers to combat that. There was an allegation of subliminal advertising in years past, and it still hangs around a little bit. Subliminal advertising is the advertising takes place without you realizing it. It's taking place inside your head. There was a famous study done of a movie theater in New Jersey, and in that movie theater, they was running ads in between film frames. So they would edit in an ad, and they would show really salty popcorn, and then they'd do more of the movie, and then show a really, really condensated cup of Coke. And they measured the results, and supposedly people rushed to the concession stands and bought popcorn and Coke. So subliminal advertising goes on underneath it, that level. What is the future of advertising? Well, we do know that it's going to be integrated. We know that it's going to be embedded in media through strategies like product placement. Product placement is where an advertiser will purchase the right to have their Starbucks coffee mug on the Voice TV show, or paid to have any product inside of a movie that's clearly displayed, Adidas shirts, etc. That's called product placement. We know that integration is going to involve product placement. It's going to involve promotion. It's going to involve marketing. Denny's restaurant, for example, when it advertises, it sends out a press kit. It sends out an email to customers. It tries to get on TV shows like the Today Show. It takes out a full-page ad. There's a lot of different things going into integrated marketing. And because of the internet, that's where advertising is headed. Have a great day.